What is up guys, Clay Enjoyer here, and it's time to enjoy. And in this video, I'm making Conquest fighting. I thought it would be easier to start with first instead of Conquest because he is smaller, so in my head it would also be quicker to sculpt him instead of Conquest and hopefully get this video out on time. But spoiler alert, this video is super late. Right now, this first layer of clay looks pretty ugly, so I can smooth it out and his arms and his legs and his back to cover up all the bad looking detail in place for eventual good looking detail, starting with building up his legs to make them look a little bit less like a chicken. Of course, like any other superhero, the muscles have to be at least somewhat uniform on both sides, so that's what I can do with his other leg before adding in his feet, which are also slightly misshapen in terms of their size, but if you only look really carefully, you would notice a difference. But with his feet in place and angled slightly, I can blend in his calves, which now that I think about it, are way too unrealistic, and are probably my most unrealistic body standard up to this point. With some knees in place, I can start working on detailing up his arms because they're a little bit thin right now. If he's capable of flying, he's gonna need some strong wingsuit lats, which I can add to the side, but because his other arm is in the way, I'll just suspend disbelief and hope that you guys assume he has another lat, it's just covered up, before I can then carve in the detail to his chest and his abs, blending it into his suit so he doesn't look as muscular as Conquest, because I want Conquest to look like super beefy in comparison to Invincible, but just slightly less. At this point, Mark is looking fairly normal to a superhero, but he does need some back muscles because right now his back is looking incredibly flat, and every superhero always has muscles everywhere. No comment. Now I can finally start doing one of the last things before the hands and the head, starting with the shoulders, which are blobs of clay blended into his arms, and the biceps, which are the same thing, just a bit smaller. Of course, making sure that the muscles are mirrored on both sides before then starting making the punching hand that will be punching Conquest, starting with his basic hand shape and then following it with the knuckles and the individual fingers. With the fingers shaped out and Mark's thumb in place, I can now start making his head. Luckily for me, Mark's helmet slash mask thing only covers up about a third of his head, which is good for me because I don't actually have to sculpt eyes, which for me, whenever I sculpt eyes, they always look kind of funky and a little bit bug-eyed, I think. Or maybe it's just the eyes are a little bit like pushed out. But with the glasses in place, I can blend them in to make them look like it's one piece instead of two. Obviously, after I make his eyes, the next step is to make his nose, which I can blend in now, along with the little nose balls on the side, because this Mark is supposed to be somewhat realistic, as well as his mouth that I made off camera, and I kind of carved a defining line for his mask and blended in his ears to the mask to make it look like it's supposed to. Now I can start by adding his hair, which starts as just a blob of clay. I don't know what you guys really expected. I've just been working with, like, I don't know, uranium, I guess. But once I shape it a little bit to get it, well, looking better, I can start carving a bunch of lines into it off camera and then squish it onto his head. And now, that's the complete, and it's time to make Conquest. Building Conquest pretty much takes the exact same steps, except that he's just way beefier than Mark, and he actually has a face instead of like a helmet slash mask that covers up some of it, which is going to be annoying later, but whatever, because faces are probably one of the most important parts. Now, this Viltrumite isn't some chicken, so he's going to need a lot of clay to build up his muscles, starting with his legs, which start as just, well, a giant blob of clay attached to either of his legs and blended in, because I need to make Conquest look like he could single-handedly or single-leggedly kick through an entire building. I can then do the same thing for either of his arms, blending in clay and making his arms look extra beefy, before then going onto his chest to add some extra clay to make the sculpture look a little bit more interesting and a little bit less flat. Also because Conquest is incredibly muscular too. Then I can add his lat to the side, but at the moment this lat is going to be cut down a bit because I went a little overboard, but that's off camera so you guys don't have to worry about it. I wanted to make sure that Conquest is definitely more muscular than Mark, so when I carve out his chest muscles and his abs, I can carve with the tool way deeper than I did with Mark's suit, so the abs and chest are much more defined before then smoothing them out, to make them look at least kind of natural. Even though the Viltrumites are technically aliens, but they're like humanoids, so it's okay, I guess. Now, to make this Viltrumite look like an absolute brick of muscle, I can give him some obliques on either side as well, before giving him some blobs of clay blended in to act as his shoes slash feet. Then I can also start building up his thighs, because they need to be appropriately thundery, I guess. Also because that's just how the Conquest's design is, so of course, I gotta make it accurate as possible. Which, now that I think about it, Conquest's thighs are like as big as Mark's head, now that the video is about up to this point. But I can do the same thing for his calves, making them absolutely monstrous in size, but that's okay, because I think it makes the sculpture look even better. Just like Conquest's upper body, his legs need a little bit of defining, which is what I'm doing here, using the same tool to define his leg muscles into 3 separate muscles, instead of like one solid muscle. Then I can also add his knees, because I want this sculpture to have a tiny bit of anatomy, I guess. Or not, I'm not really sure. But what I do know is that I can add his shoulders, which are these giant blobs of clay blended in, because his arms are a little bit small, but the biceps, forearms, and shoulders really help bulk out his arms. Instead of, I don't know, me like carving the clay out of his arms, it's a lot easier to add in my opinion. Then I can do the same thing for the shoulders to add some detail with the tool, to make them look even more defined and look like he's taken too much steroids. But then again, too much steroids can never be a bad thing. With most of the arms done now, I can start working on making Conquest's his own gauntlet that he definitely didn't steal and or modify from Thanos, because in my opinion their gauntlets both look incredibly similar, just Conquest's gauntlet doesn't have any holes for gemstones, but it does have this whole circle thing for where his elbow will be, with the little bit of detail carved in roughly where his wrist would be on the gauntlet. I can then make his hand, which starts as a blob of clay with fingers cut into them, because even though it's technically a mechanical hand, it's still a hand, so it has to look at least kind of like what it's supposed to, even though at the very end, it's only barely, because all I really added was some little notches and a piece of clay on top to make the hand shield guard thing, before then attaching the hand and blending it in off camera. Then I can add his thumb with the same little bit of details on the extra fingers, and that is Conquest's gauntlet done, and I can start working on his other arm. To make Conquest's other hand, I can do the same thing that I did for his mechanical gauntlet, except slightly smaller and basically the same pose, but just closer to his side instead of extending out, punching, and just like Mark's muscular back, I want to give Conquest one too, which is I can do right here, followed by his muscular thing as well, before then starting to do his little cape in the front. After attaching his little cape to the front and blending it into his stomach muscles and curling it into a more dynamic pose, I can give Conquest a belt all around his body, before then giving him his little side pouch things on his belt, just like the original animation. I don't know what he would actually hold in these pouches because he's so strong I doubt he would need anything, but I don't know. I guess it's just artistic flair. Like all my other sculptures before, Conquest's face is like any other face I've made before, which is an aluminum foil ball wrapped in clay that I can give some eyes, a nose, and eyelids, and the eyebrow ridge as all normal sculptures do. Now with that blended in place, I can add a little bit more detail to the nose by adding the nose ball things, before then blending in and detailing up some eyebrows to go on top of his eyebrow ridges. Because even though Conquest is an old man, he isn't that old. He still has eyebrows. Then I can do the same thing for his majestic facial hair, which is just a mustache. But it's pretty easy to texture, at least. It's the same thing as the eyebrows. With some ears that I made off camera because I thought they were a little flimsy, I can now start working on his hair, which is the same process as his facial hair, just on the back and sides of his head instead of the front. Now, I don't know if any of you guys could actually tell, but Conquest's face is looking a little bit too clean right now, other than his hair, because he's supposed to be like thousands of years old, and he needs to look old. So, I can give him his giant scar that runs across his face. I don't entirely remember Conquest's lore, I guess, but I'm pretty sure he got the massive scar when fighting a Ragnar's, I think. But I can attach his head in place, adjust it a little bit off camera, and blend in his neck to make him look incredibly powerful. But not before forgetting to make his lats off camera. But with these two sculptures done, I can now start painting. To start off, I can paint my sculpture blue as a base coat before then putting the black on eventually. But right now I need to make sure I actually get two coats on instead, because this blue was being a little bit difficult. But once that blue is dry, I can move on to doing lighter blue for the highlights, like around his muscles. Obviously, where else was I actually supposed to do highlights? Duh. But with that out of the way, then I can start doing black on all the details that are supposed to be black, like his shoulders, his back, and the small line on his chest in black as well. But once I get all those things out of the way, I can start painting Mark's hair, which is technically black, but with the black that I have, it's a touch bit glossy, so I was trying to cut the black glossiness down a little bit, but I used a little bit too much white, so it kind of looks a little bit gray, but it's passable for black. Just don't look at it too hard. But with the hair done, I can start working on painting the hands and his face in this peach tan color, which is definitely a little darker than I intended, but I want Conquest and Mark to have different skin tones just to add a little bit of variation and make it look different, I guess. I didn't really have a good reason, I just kind of felt like it. But what I do know is that I can do some highlights in a lighter pinkish flesh color that looks pretty similar to Conquest's flesh. No, skin, not flesh. Ew, what? But then I can paint his goggles in just the same glossy black like the rest of his suit, because this time I actually want it to be glossy. But with his teeth painted, that's the final detail done, and I can start working on making Conquest instead. Or not making, but painting. I don't know what any of you guys were expecting, but Conquest isn't actually that hard of a character to paint. He's almost entirely white, but this clay is a kind of a bad white. It's more of an off-white, and it has a lot of flecks and hair and dust and stuff because I can not keep my desk clean for the life of me, so I can use this clear bright white over top. One part of Conquest that isn't white is his gauntlet, which is a golden yellowish color that I can then use some more light yellow, or practically white, over top to act as light reflecting on top of the armor fist because I want it to look shiny. Then I can do the same thing inside of the elbow joint, but with blue instead of yellow. With Conquest's gauntlet already out of the way, I can paint his hands and face in an even lighter tan. But now that I think about it, when it dried, the two colors look very similar to the gauntlet, so that is a tiny bit annoying, but whatever, it's kinda too late now. But what I can do is do some even lighter tan on top of Conquest's head to make it look like light is reflecting down on his almost bald head. Conquest's scar is looking a little flat, so I can use this terracotta brown paint inside to make it look really uncomfortable, I guess, and really make it look gross, before then going to the feet and his skirt to paint them in the same Viltrumite gray, which I will be painting the rest of his patterns on in the near future. I am sorry, I am a fraud. I could not paint Conquest's Viltrumite logo on his chest and get it in the frame at the same time, so I had to do it off camera. I hope you can forgive me for that. But what I can do on camera is paint all the lines on his shoulders, arms, stomach, and back. And don't worry guys, I didn't forget to paint his belt black, which I can very carefully do, trying incredibly hard not to paint over the white or gray that I tried so hard working on. And then I can also do some light gray on the skirt and on the shoes to make it look like light is bouncing off of them like the gauntlet. And to do the muscles, I can do a light gray in the recesses. I originally made a mistake and I should have done his body a light gray to begin with, so I could have done highlights, but I didn't do that, so I gotta do it the opposite way, doing light gray on top instead to act as sort of a gradient slash detail like I did on the facial hair and his head. With that looking good, I can now start making the base. But not before I carefully paint Conquest's eyes off camera, because that was something that was also way too fidgety. But with both characters done, I can now start making the base. Now, this base is actually different. Instead of a circle, it's going to be a rectangle. And to make it even more interesting, I'm going to take these clay sheets and break them up into multiple pieces. These individual pieces are going to act like pieces of broken concrete that I can paint and strewn around the base to make it look like they're in the middle of a destroyed city, like Conquest and Invincible are for pretty much the entire fight. With a little bit of dry brushing, these concrete slabs are looking pretty good. Now, I was rushing this video and I was really trying to get it out quickly, even though that didn't happen. So off camera, I made a bunch of concrete rubble-esque glue and put this stuff in it, just like the little bits of gravel I put in now, before then dry brushing a tiny bit of extra paint to make it really pop. Once I paint the base black, it's time for the reveal.
Stand ready for my arrival, worm.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and you might get to see more Viltrumite action next. Thrag, potentially. Battle Beast, maybe. Anyways, see you in the next video. Bye.